Welcome to another episode of the Next Generation Podcast. I am so grateful that you are here listening in today. Today on the podcast, I have the amazing Callie Thorne with me today. She is a North Dakota rancher with her husband, CJ, and their three beautiful little kids. Callie is an amazing entrepreneur, and I am just so excited to have her on the podcast today to talk about anything and everything from mindset to a little bit about her ranching experience and everything else in between, being a mama of three up there in North Dakota. So, Callie, thank you so much for coming on today. If you would just take it away, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Awesome. I will. Thank you for having me, Lauren. I appreciate it. I know we just got done discussing the work and time and effort that it takes to put podcasts together, and it's fun to be invited to get to come on and be a part of your platform and in front of your audience. I don't take that lightly. So thank you. Yes, like you said, my kids are actually the fifth generation on the land that we are on currently up in Northwest North Dakota. I always try to say that really clearly because it seems like when I travel, people are always like, oh yeah, we could tell where you're from because of your accent. But then I usually explain to them I'm about 2 hours from Canada and an hour from Montana. So we are definitely up in that northwest corner. The house I live in was the house I grew up in. And before that, it was my grandma and grandpa's house. So we definitely have some deep roots up here in North Dakota. We've always particularly been a cow-calf operation and did quite a bit of farming. And now only the ranching side has really grown the past several years. It seems like we've got cow-calf operation, a backgrounding feedlot, sell a lot of beef, which we've been doing even more so, I would say, since COVID hit, with some more changes in the works, I will say. And then maybe run some yearlings. I think it just varies, but that's a lot of people in agriculture. You see what the markets are doing, see what the weather's doing, and what opportunities are presented to you that year. So besides that, and I've got three kids. They are 12, 10, and 6 years old. So this year's been a little bit different because this is the first year that all three of them are in school. So that kind of has changed things up a little bit for us. But I guess it's given me more time as well because I run a leadership training business where I kind of partner with the John Maxwell team. I've got access to a lot of curriculum and training. So whether it's for companies, organizations, teams, individuals, I've got usually a handful of different irons in the fire that we're doing there, whether it's keynote speaking and traveling or doing coaching, training. And then I also am a mental health first aid facilitator. So we can dive into that later too if you want. But I always tell people think of first aid CPR, but this is mental health first aid. So it's really diving into that side of things, not just the physical, but the mental, of course. So a lot of different things going, but that's just a little bit about me and what our journey is kind of looking like these days anyways.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself. It's so fun to be able to talk to a multi-passionate entrepreneur and someone who does have a lot of irons in the fire. And you're not only a multi-passionate entrepreneur, but you're a mama of three, which I'm sure keeps you insanely busy with all of that and balancing sports and all of the other things that come with ranch life. So it's so cool to be able to see such a successful woman in the agricultural industry being able to balance both a business and motherhood and everything else that you and your husband partner on and things like that. I would love if you could share a little bit more about just that journey of getting to that point in your mental space, and then also just like being okay with it physically as a mama bear and wanting to be there for your kids, but also being a passionate entrepreneur yourself as well.
Yeah, I think that's something that probably holds, especially a lot of women back, is thinking we have to play just one role. And I mean, the example I always bring up is probably farm ranch women. What's their job? A lot of times, I mean, it's to take meals to the field, or it's to do the book work, or it's to do whatever, right? And I think these are all just thoughts. And if that is your role, that's great. If you love it, is probably what I always tell
Yeah.
people. If you don't, there are a lot. I mean, have the conversation. I could talk on communication probably all day long too, but I just think there's so many people that settle in roles that weren't meant for them with their gifts and talents. And I have just always been, I mean, I do like to cook too. I probably like to bake. I love sweets. But I think sometimes I shock people when I'm like, yeah, I don't do our book work. I can't stand sitting down and doing that. It's not my gifting or talent. I hire that out. And I think some people are quick to be like, oh, well, it must be nice to hire it out. No, I find another way to make some money so I can hire somebody else to do that. Like if I can give somebody else a job that they love and I can go make money in a different arena, or I can spend time with my kids or whatever it is that I want to prioritize, I'm going to figure it out. And I think we've always kind of been my husband and I think a lot alike, which is sometimes scary, I think, but I will also give credit to that is 100% why we feel we are successful in the endeavors that we chase. It's just a different mindset and perspective. And so I knew I didn't want to, I shouldn't say just, but I didn't want to be home full time on the ranch. I enjoyed doing so many of these other things that often you hear people when they're on their deathbed, like, what do they regret? They regret not living the life that was true to them. And I know what I love. You can, and everybody can sense that. You know what fills your cup, what brings you excitement and joy. I mean, I get excited talking about it right now. And I think it's so important that our kids see that too, that you don't have to be put in this mold or think that this is the only option for you. There's a plethora of opportunities out there, and you have to figure out what fits right for you, but know that it's going to change too throughout the seasons.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that gave me chills as a woman who is getting married soon and wants to be involved still in my businesses and everything like that, but still have my place in the family operation. And it just gives me personally so much motivation and like light to look at the future and the excitement that that has in store. And I love how you mentioned the fact that you being able to hire out your accounting or bookkeeping or stuff like that you could quote unquote say are like more traditional roles that the women tend to take over, and how you reworded that in the way that no, I go and make more money so that I am able to do that, because I truly just don't, that's not what lights my fire. And I am a huge believer that time is money, and it's one of those things that, do you want to be spending your time doing that, or would you rather go spend it doing something else? And I love how you talked about that a little bit. Can you expand a little bit more? I'd love to hear about the communication side with your husband and your family and everything like that, and kind of like, in a sense, setting those boundaries, but then also just setting expectations pretty early on to be able to live the life that God has given you.
Yeah. And one thing I want to mention too, it made me think about it, is I think often when I'm coaching people, when I've got coaching clients or we're talking about it, is we often think that it's this black and white thinking. This, I have to choose this or I have to choose that. I have to choose that I'm going to be an entrepreneur and run a business, or I have to be with the kids. And no matter what the situation is, I often encourage people to think, what if it could be both and? Like, how could it be this and this? We've all been given the same amount of 24 hours. And I think that's a big thing I stress to people. But what do I want to fill my time with? Like I think sometimes we don't sit back and really consider that, because we compare so much, and it's like, well, look what she's doing and how's she doing that. And I mean, I had a very good friend ask me that the other day. She's like, help me like understand where your mind is at or how you get this all done. And I started off with, I said, first off, like, all you see is social media. You
Yes.
are not with me every day, all day, seeing what my life is really like. And I think people believe that I just go, 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 and my life is frantic. And I do not want a life like that. I will not live that way. And so I am very strategic in, how do we set those boundaries? What are my expectations for the day? How do I lay it out? Because people would probably find it hard to believe, like, I can go in the middle of the day and go for a walk to the mailbox, or I can read a book if I want to, or I can fold laundry, or I can be speaking in front of a crowd. I mean, it just, the days truly vary. But sometimes people only see when I'm on a stage or when I'm driving somewhere or that I'm hosting a class. And so I think being realistic with what social media is putting out there, people need to take a pause and look back. But then my big thing, I guess, that I stress too is, you have to know what your values and priorities are, because too often we are living by somebody else's and what we think it should look like for me. Right. I'm going through a study right now where we kind of look at, am I thinking in the gap or am I thinking in the gain most days? And it's been eye opening for women that are doing it right now, because I ask them, what are you measuring against? What are your ideals? Is it ones that you actually set for your family? and what you believe in and what you want your day-to-day life to look like? Or is it you're trying to keep up with Karen down the road and everything that she is saying yes to, even though they don't excite you, like it doesn't bring you joy and stuff? So I think that's a big thing. My husband and I are big on, we know we have to communicate, and it's like, are you home today? Are you in town today? What do you got going on? Do we have any meetings that we're partnering up on? And I mean, even I laugh when it comes to boundaries. So I'm on my home place, and my brother is calving out some of his heifers there and some of his cows. My mom and dad live 3 miles away from us. I mean, there's a lot of family going on and stuff. And so just one of the tiny things that obviously I have to do is make it clear, like, I am working from home a lot of times. And so sometimes I have to hang the door or hang a sign on the door, and it's like, do not come in. I am doing a podcast, or do not come in. I've got a Zoom meeting I'm hosting, and just little things like that. But communication is so critical. I've had so many conversations on that just this week. It's almost laughable. Like, almost every problem, if I'm talking with a farm ranch family or I am talking with a leading agricultural company, it comes down to, could have that been solved with communication? I'm guessing so, right? Even if things are going really well, I ask them, it's like, what would make your company better? What would make your family operation better? And it's like, well, we could probably communicate a little more. And it's like, yep, I believe it. And I will just end by saying, my family is far from perfect, so it's always a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is something that a lot of us can probably relate to. We learned very young how to yell at each other in the working pen while working cows, but maybe not how to necessarily communicate as adults very healthily about those boundaries and setting those expectations very clear with everyone. So I very much relate. And as a person who, my brother's younger than me, and we're starting to enter that phase of life where we are like, okay, looking back at going back to the ranch and what that's going to look like and all of those things in our own personal futures in ag. It's not going to look like how it looks right now. And it's not going to look like how it's going to look in 5 years, 10 years down the road. Like, we're going to have to be ever evolving and ever changing with our family dynamics and stuff. And so I know that working with family can be really hard. Do you have any advice for living on a fifth generation ranch that your kids are the fifth generation on, and kind of going about that with your family as well?
hmm I think you just have to be clear. I mean, even like the situation that you could potentially be going back to, I think people are so used to what's been done generations prior,
Yeah.
and what, of course, can and can't be changed. I mean, so much of it comes down to perspective and like paradigm shifts of, okay, before we farmed and we were cow calf operation. And it's like, okay, but when markets weren't what we wanted them to be, did we have a feedlot, or did we have something built where if we need to hold them back, that we can? I mean, do we have different options, even when it comes to simple things like, well, not simple, but branding? I mean, well, we always did it this way. It's like, well, what if we started at this pasture and maybe rotated these pens around? I mean, just, I think people in this industry have to constantly be forward thinking and open to the different ideas. And we aren't always. And so being clear on, if I'm going back to the operation or I'm deciding if I want to be involved, I don't think we sit back and decipher, what do we want that vision to look like? Like, does it mean we have to just go back to the way everything's were, or so I've got a younger brother as well. We're about 5 years apart, and it's just him and I for siblings. And so it's like, okay, what do we want this to look like? What are you going to do versus what are we going to do? We've got
Yeah.
different operations, but we often work together and stuff, but running separate businesses. And it's like, how I might want to do something might look different than what he wants to do. But if we're not clear on that, I mean, if you could think right now, what would I want to change? Like, I don't want hollering when we're working animals. And I know people might laugh at that, but it's like, I'm not going to do it. You can't
Hmm.
walk into any other corporation or business or team meeting
Yep.
and treat each other that way that maybe some people do on different operations. And so I'm not going to do it. And so, and I think people are like, well, how else are you going to get it done? Or, I mean, trust me, we've got plenty of jokes in this industry, right? But it's like, there's never been this thought that, oh, wait, we don't have to do it that way. Or maybe we could
Yeah.
just slow things down and actually get them done faster. So, yeah, a lot of that I think is brought to the front of what do I want it to look like here? What do I want my kids to see? I mean, I often stress that. I always say more is caught than is taught. You can tell
Mm.
your kids not to yell at someone, but guess what? They're watching your every move out there, watching not only how you treat family, but people on the sidewalk in town too. So more is caught than is taught. And I hope I'm setting a good example as I can right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that mindset with not doing it how it's always been done, and then also like just everything else you said plays so closely and so well into entrepreneurship as well. And outside of the cattle operation, what that looks like. So, speak a little bit on that of just kind of your journey with entrepreneurship, and then also how just any insight that you have for the entrepreneurs listening, whether that be they are on the family ranch and direct selling that beef, or if they are in agriculture in a different facet than being directly on the ranch as well.
Yeah, I sometimes have to laugh when people ask questions like that because I really think about it. I've probably been, I mean, if you think back, when did you first get paid for a job? And I mean, for me, it was probably babysitting some neighbor kids when I was younger.
Yep.
And you remember that first time you got paid, and it's like, okay, so I can just show up and do a job, do something that helps somebody else, and they're going to give me money. And one of my friends, they always say like money buys options. Money gives
Yeah.
you choices. And so I don't care if you have a lot or want a lot, have a little, don't want to. I mean, whatever the case is, if you have money, you will have options in life. And that means you have the option to take a vacation. You have the option to spend it on fancy shoes. You have option to buy more cows. But without that money, you don't have options. You don't even have
Yeah.
options to give to other people. And so I've really thought about that a lot. But I think the big thing for me was even in high school and college, I always did 4-H, FFA. I traveled a ton in college and made a lot of connections and stuff. But after I was in extension for about 5 years, and during that time, I was also doing a little side business. I was in direct sales, actually with Mary Kay for quite a few years. Still am to this day, actually. But I think that's where I really learned about entrepreneurship because while I was with NDSU Extension for about 5 years, I think entrepreneurship opened my eyes to just me getting to call the shots. I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
comes down to for me when you're an entrepreneur. And I loved my job. I loved extension, doing 4-H, working with kids, people in agriculture, the community. And so it was extremely difficult for me to walk away from that job. But at that time, I had a 2-year-old and a brand new baby. And for me personally, and I know isn't the same for everybody, but I was just like, will I regret not spending more time with my kids when they're little? And that's just the question that kept coming and coming in my head. And I knew I had an opportunity with Mary Kay if I wanted to try it and chase that and see what could happen and stuff. And so I did. Long story short, I did that for probably 7 years. I was in the top 1% of the company. And talk about, I mean, I think everybody, no matter your thoughts, I know everybody's got thoughts on direct sales and stuff, right? But you will learn so much if you try something like that. I mean, there's so
Yes.
many people, so many of my friends just started there. I don't sell Pampered Chef, sell leggings, sell whatever gets you excited, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think you learn so much how to work from a team, how to communicate, how to lead, and all of those different things. And so that was probably first big eye opener to entrepreneurship. But the funny thing is, and some people know this story, when I decided to leave my work as an extension agent, I told my husband, I said, whatever you do not leave your job though. Why do everybody say that? Is because of the health insurance, right?
Yep.
Somebody has to work an outside job so that we have health insurance if we farm and ranch. But I'm a big believer too that that's just a thought. That's not a fact.
Hmm.
And that's what's taken me a long ways in life is deciphering fact from my own personal thoughts or the thoughts that other people have put in my mind. And that was a thought that was put into my mind at a young age that somebody has to work off the farm to make it work, number one, so that the numbers, so you make money somehow. And number two, so you have health insurance. And I believe both of those are lies. Like I fully do. They're just thoughts that we've believed. And because we believe them, that's the result that we produce and stuff. And so, ironically, about 3 to 4 months after I left my job, my husband quit his good oil field job up here in North Dakota. And so, since our 20s, we have been full time entrepreneurs. And he's been building farm and ranch, making some changes so that we know we can count on some other things, not just that one enterprise, you're right, not just cow calf operation, but
Yeah.
let's get that feedlot built. Let's have a background in feedlot and take in other people's cattle if needed. Hey, let's sell beef. It looks like there's a huge opportunity here. And so that you can pivot when there's those things that we can't control, like the weather, the markets, the world, whatever it is that's going
Yeah.
on and stuff. So I think that's been huge for us. And we did that at a young age. And I will tell you, it's been successful because we believed. I mean, the thing I kept telling myself is, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, I'm going to end up in a box down by the river. And I really don't think that's going to happen. And so I have
Yeah.
to believe for the better. And I think that's made a huge difference. If you think you're going to fail, you probably will. But if you have this inkling of confidence and courage to try it, it's like, let's just see what happens.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is so well put, because I feel like it's one of those things that you just, if you don't believe in yourself and your own capabilities, you're not going to be successful. I do not care how many sales you make. You could be $1 million business revenue, but if you don't believe in yourself, your business is going to tank. Like the second you hit a valley, you're not going to be able to stick with it. And that is so powerful to remember as entrepreneurs or as people in the agricultural sector and industry, as we are pulling out the next generation and making waves and changes in this industry and looking at it in a different light. That is so important to remember. And I love how you also touched on the multi businesses that you guys have and everything like that too. I think that that is so important that to hear as farmers and ranchers and as people in this next generation, to bring that mindset to the ranch that I grew up on an
And I
operation. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Lauren, one thing that I talk about too is like the difference between self confidence and confidence, right?
Yeah.
Confidence, I get confidence if I were to give a keynote talk at a banquet and everybody claps and cheers. It's like that builds my confidence. That feels good. Or if
Yes.
somebody says, like, hey, I see you guys. I see what you're doing. I see what you're creating. Or I had some of your steak the other night. It's the best we've had. Like, all those things build my confidence. But I will tell you, you don't always have that. You don't
Yeah.
always have people cheering you on. And I run. I like to run. I've done some ultra marathons and stuff. And I often think of that example. Like, it's fun when people are lining the streets cheering you on. It gives you that confidence. Like, you can feel it. But I will tell you, sometimes when I'm out there running in the Badlands on the Mattahay and we're putting on a lot of miles, you're by yourself out there. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when you have to dig deep and have that self confidence to take the next step and the next step, because there aren't always going to be people there cheering you on. You have to believe it yourself and what you can achieve.
Yes, absolutely. Talk a little bit more about that mindset and how you have to have that mindset shift as a young person coming up in agriculture, and then also just as an entrepreneur in general. I'm sure that your direct sales and being involved in that at such a young age gave you a really good basis, because I also did the same thing. I was with a health and wellness business when the second I turned 18, I signed up type of thing and got my start in that. Saw my mom do Mary Kay for multiple years when I was growing up as well. So very well versed in the direct sales industry, and hate it if you want, have your opinion if you want, but it gave me such a great basic understanding of personal development, growth, mindset, how to do sales, how to grow a business, all of these things without necessarily having to have the tons of capital invested or creating an idea myself. And it gave me such a great basis to catapult off and have all of my businesses right now. So I would just love to hear your mindset shifts and all of that advice that you have to give as well.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And that's what I always tell people is, I mean, I maybe wasn't a lover of makeup and all those things, but I will tell you what Mary Kay taught me in business, has been priceless, all of that. And
Yes.
so I love it. And I think when it comes to mindset, that is where I see people succeed or maybe not. Now, I'm not saying I don't ever fail. I do. But I guess that's a prime example of I usually don't see things as a failure. It's like, okay, here's a great learning opportunity. What could if we
Yes.
changed? what can we pivot right now or do differently so that that doesn't happen again? And so I often, like when I'm coaching people or working one-on-one with clients or even in some group coaching scenarios, it's like you're given circumstances in life. You're starting this new business, or thunderstorm came through, or you just had a cow die. I mean, literally, you can take any sort of circumstance, um, and you get your choice, though, in thought. What do you want to think about that circumstance? And a lot of times I'll give the example even of, we've had the worst drought on record up here just a couple years ago. And so what would most people in agriculture by default, I mean, it's just human nature to think this way, let alone if it's generational, but it's human nature to be like, this is bad. This is awful. This is going to ruin everything for us. But what I work so hard on, and it's not like I've just been gifted with this. I've studied it. I've gotten multiple certificates in it, and I understand the power of a positive mind and looking at things differently, because no matter what situation you're in, you have multiple options in how you choose to think about it. So I can believe, woe is me, this is hard, this is going to be a challenge. Or I can think, okay, there's got to be opportunity here. Even though that's a drought, I'm not going to throw my hands in the air and not do anything. So let me think, who could I partner up with? What could we maybe pivot and do a little bit differently? Maybe we will have to sell some cows. And then I can have more thoughts on that even. Like,
Yes.
is that the worst thing ever? Or is it what we need to do right now because I'm trying to
Mhm.
run a business? How
Yeah.
emotionally tied do I get into some of these things? And so I think it's huge if people can separate the difference between, okay, here's what we've been handed, here's the circumstance, here's the facts, and now what am I going to think about it? Even when there's hard relationships or there's really challenging things in life, it doesn't mean I don't have empathy, or that I'm not faced with challenges, or that I'm not sad. Like, I think people have to recognize those things, but I guess how long do I want to sit in it? I have to look, is it serving me? Is it helping me in my business? Is it helping me in my relationship, whatever it might be? Or do I need to switch how I'm thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that mindset is just truly the basis for everything. It's the basis for how you're successful your operation is going to be. It's the basis for how you run your operation in general. It's the basis for just the way you walk into life and the way that you go about your life and everything like that. And so it's so important for people in agriculture, I feel like, to maybe start to open themselves up to the idea of the mindset shifts and the bettering yourself and all of that stuff. Whereas, like, the personal development realm used to be like, oh, that's very hippie, or that's very like, they only do that in the big cities. We don't do that stuff out here. We cowboy up and we get over it, type of thing. But it's one of those things that it can't be that way anymore. And I think it's genuinely from a business standpoint, the top business owners in the world, and then also from a mental health standpoint as well.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, if you asked a lot of people right now, and maybe it's more an older generation, and it depends on who you talk to and how they were raised and what they were taught to believe, but they would say this industry is hard. And in fact, I still remember when I came home from college and I kind of wanted to travel and see the world and work multiple places. But my husband, now, we were engaged at the time, he moved to our home place, to Northwest North Dakota. And I was like, oh, I suppose I should follow him there. And I still remember, though, my mom, we were standing in the yard and she said to me, are you sure you want to come back here?
Yeah.
And she asked that because she knows how hard it was, what a challenge it was. And that's what a lot of people will say. And I'm not saying it's an easy industry. I'm not going to take it that far and say, oh, yeah, it's a breeze, everything goes our way. That's not true. But I will tell you, the way I think about it and show up to it 100% makes a difference. Because if I thought I was going into an industry that's always it's always a challenge, there's always struggles to be faced, man, that is not how I want to live decade after decade. And there's a lot of people that are living that way. And I think, yeah, you touched on the mental health side of it. I mean, it's so high in agriculture. We just went out for supper last night with a couple of our veterinarian friends, and that we talked about that, is how
Yeah.
high their suicide rate is and stuff. And so I think a lot of it, there's a lot of pressures. There are a lot of uncontrollables. There's a lot of weight on people's shoulders. Like, I don't want to be the generation to lose this family place.
Yeah.
And so But that's where I'm saying we have a choice. If I thought about it that way every day, I'd get worn down. I mean, putting that kind of pressure on myself versus like, this is pretty exciting. And I'm honored to be able to be on this land and trying to find ways to pivot and make it work and see how I can evolve the next generation and see what's to come. It's exciting and it's fun, but that's how I frame it. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all just your perception. It's taking that time to build the mental muscle, and it truly is a muscle that you have to build. Look at it like you're going to the gym. Everyone probably understands that in order to grow your muscles in the gym, you have to rip them to shreds. And then they have to
Mhm.
reheal, and they're going to get stronger through that. And I think with the mental toughness and the mental battles and that perceptive shift that we have to go through and stuff, it is not something that you can just wake up and change overnight. It is something that you have to continuously work on. And I would love to hear your kind of like thought process on that. And then also just how to continue to build that mindset. And if you have any book recommendations or anything like that that you've done personally, or just different things like that as well.
Yeah, well, that's the unfortunate thing is the world we live in today, right? Is we're
Yeah.
mad if our Amazon doesn't show up in 2, 3 days. Granted, that never happens for us. I had to laugh. My cousin lives down in Arizona, and he's like, "Oh, we can get our stuff the day of." I was like, "What?" I mean, I'm excited if it shows up within the week. So it is not a quick fix. Thinking like, okay, I'm just going to be positive today. I'm going
Yeah.
to try and do what Callie's saying and be a glass half full versus half empty. But I've practiced this for years. I've studied it. I am plugged into groups and teams and work with coaches that help me, and that's what I do. I myself have a coach that works with me on a variety of things, whether it's business or health, things like that. And I think that's what people have to do is find those in your community or your neighbors or your friends and take a hard look around and see like who am I being surrounded by. I'm sure most everybody's heard that saying, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. And it's just crazy to me what the research even shows. I mean, you can start dressing like them, you start talking like them, your finances will even reflect each other. And so I really have to think about, okay, who am I spending time with, who am I learning from? And I think when you're engaged in the learning process and you realize like that's a lifelong journey, I think when people believe I've made it, we finally hit it, and then they call it quits. I mean, I'm just like, wait, what do you mean? That's what I get a kick out of. My dad, I've asked him a couple times. We take some of their cows on share, and I mean they're there almost every day. My mom and dad helping with something, and I've asked my dad, and I knew what the answer would be, but I said to him, like, Dad, what would you do if you retired? And he just kind of looked at me and gave me this look like, what does that mean? Right? But he just paused and he said, I'm doing it right now. I
Yeah.
mean, getting to come down, and he doesn't have to be in charge of everything. I think that's one benefit with our relationship that we've all worked hard on is he doesn't feel like he has to call the shots at whatever he is, 60 some year olds. I know 89 year olds that feel like they need to call. That's a whole nother topic of discussion. But it's like he loves it. He loves what he's doing, and he gets to go ice fishing if he wants to, or on a hunting trip, and know
Yeah.
that things are taken care of. But that's what it does for us too. He can still help with chores, and we can be gone if we need to and stuff. But I need people to understand it's not a quick fix. You're not going to change relationships overnight, or you're not going to change habits that you've had for 20, 40, 60 years and think you can just change it that quick. It takes time. It takes more than anything to start with. It's a conscious awareness of, I don't like how this is. I want to change this. I mean, maybe it's eating habits. Maybe it's how we take care of the cattle. Maybe it's a relationship, how we discuss things when it comes to family dynamics. And so, where can we start? It's number one, just that awareness of this isn't working. Now we need to talk about it. Or if it's a personal thing, how can I get better at this? What's step one? And people have got to realize like you're smart enough to figure this out. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times we're like, oh, I don't know. It's like you do. You deep down, you do. Because I could tell you my path to entrepreneurship and the steps I took. I could tell you why I have a good relationship with my husband or why I do X, Y, and Z, but it may not be how you do it. And so I think that's the gift of coaching is I can help you figure out what's best for you or how to approach the situation. Is it always going to work out 100% right? Nope, but then you've learned something and we can look at it a little bit differently. So I listen to a handful of podcasts and stuff. I listen to books on Audible quite a bit. Um, Man, probably I have to say, just because we are going through a study right now on a book called The Gap and the Gain, but I think it ties so much to my work that I do, and it really makes you pause and think. How often do I look back and see how far we've come? You know, I can have goals and want to achieve things and go so far in life or business or personally, but I think for high achievers, a lot of times all we do is look at how much we missed it by. And it's like, oh, there I did it again. I missed it. We didn't hit our financial goals, or the cow herd isn't at what we thought, or I mean, all these things you can compare by, but how often do we look back and say, but look how far we've come?
Yeah.
And we don't give ourselves enough credit for that of where we've been, and what I mean, that's the journey. That's the whole journey to growth. And we don't spend enough time in that arena, especially in agriculture, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a fellow high achiever, I related to that very well and very closely. That it's one of those things that I had to learn through a lot of therapy and a lot of just like understanding myself and my own habits and my own mindset, how to go about and look at just the way that I go about life and the way that I was very negatively being my own worst critic and everything else like that. That I would beat myself down before anyone else had the opportunity to even critique me. And I think that that is a big thing in ranching too. We play the comparison game a lot, and then we also just get really stuck in just like blame game, whether it's blaming the weather or blaming ourselves or the hindsight is always 2020, guys. Like we can always look back and find something that we can be better at, but at the same time it's where are we going next? Okay, we screwed up there, but that was a learning opportunity for us. And just like you said earlier, it's resetting the way that you look at failures as well too. It's you're not failing like flat on your face. Use that as a growth opportunity and a step to the next level. Fail forward, just keep on moving, and you're gonna learn something from it. Like even if you didn't reach the cow herd number or reach the profit revenue that you wanted this year, or launch that new business, or get your morning routine together yet, or spend more time with God, or like whatever your goal is right now, even if you're not doing it perfectly, just start with that 1%. And I think that might have actually been something that I either learned from Ed Milet or John Maxwell or someone like that, that just start with the 1%. Just aim to get 1% better every single day. And all of a sudden you're going to look back in 60, 360 days, whatever it be, and you're going to be like, oh, okay, that actually started to work type of thing.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I do a 90 miles in 90 days challenge. And it is wild I mean, sometimes I'll have 50 people in that group at a time, and we just finished round 10. I'm sure I'll be starting another one soon, but it's a mile. And for so many people, it's like, oh, well, that's simple. I can go walk a mile, and it has to be intentional. You can't just look at your watch at the end of the day and be like, I got enough steps in that I hit a mile, right? It has to be
Yeah.
set aside time to go walk or run a mile. And it's like, okay, day one, check, we're feeling good and stuff. And then it's, oh, day two, oh, wait, day three, but it's raining out and I don't have a treadmill. Or day four, I have to travel today. Like, I don't know if I have time.
Yep.
And more than anything, I mean, yeah, it makes people feel good physically. And I think people need to recognize, like, just go for a walk and get some fresh air outside if you need to. What a difference that makes for your body. But man, by the time these people hit day 90, they feel unstoppable. And I'm not talking
Yeah.
like they even have to go run a marathon or anything. It's what has changed truly in the wiring in their brain of what they believe is possible has completely changed. It's like, huh, I didn't know if I could go all 90 days without skipping a day. Now it's this whole new view of, I wonder if I could try this, or what if I could
Yeah.
start this business I thought of, or what if we could pivot this thing. And I always tell people, kind of going back to what you were just talking on, is we give a lot of energy to the negative. what's wrong, what's not working. And a lot of times there are things that we can't control if we're talking in agriculture. But I always tell people, give the same amount of energy to the good, to the positive. So people will often be debating, like, I don't know if we should try this. I could give a beef example. I don't know if we should try this. I'm trying to decide. Do I dare say this on the podcast? I think I will. We're looking at buying a beef processing facility, which will be a whole new thing. And this is a good example, even if it doesn't work out, because I have so many fears, right? I mean, we've never taken something on like this, and we'll all of a sudden now have a full business where we've got 10 employees and we've got people counting on us, and we have to make this cash flow and make it work and have happy customers and all the things. And so I could put a lot of negative energy to like what's going to go wrong or what the problems could be. You're always going to have that though. You can put time and energy towards those things, or I can give just as much energy to why this is so exciting and why this is a huge opportunity and why it's going to be fun to make a difference in those employees' lives, let alone our customers' lives, our neighbors who can come do custom processing. I mean, give the same, hopefully more energy towards why this might work, what went well today, or think about even when's the last time we celebrated our successes. I mean, people don't take the time for that. And I think kids notice that, employees notice that, especially if you've got an organization or a business. It's like, it's that always trying to achieve, always trying to get more. And it's like, you maybe hit your numbers that you wanted to last year, but we didn't even pause to celebrate that. The markets were really good, but we didn't even celebrate all the time and effort that we put into those calves that just sold for record prices. I just think it's one thing that we need to pause and slow down and notice, what is the good? How can I find it? How can I consciously seek out what went right today at the end of every day? Because we're always looking at what I didn't get done. I didn't achieve enough. I didn't get that done. That went wrong. But just tell me 3 things that went right. Like really pause
Yeah.
and think about, well, I had a really good conversation with so-and-so, or whatever it might be. There's a lot of good things, and we have to pause and notice them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that habit of looking for the good and, like you said, with the gratitude and stuff, finding 3 things. And I make it a daily habit to thank God for 3 things. I am a devout Christian. Love the Lord so much. And I take the intentional time every single day to thank God for 3 things. And you know what? Maybe today it's because the sun is shining, or maybe it's because I got out of bed or something like that. Like it does not have to be crazy things, but doing that and that small little habit that seems so minuscule, it's actually, there's science behind it that it is rewiring your brain and that it is truly just putting you in a position where when the next thing does come up, your brain is already going to be slightly rewired to be able to focus on those positive things. Like, okay, we had a setback this year, but look at all of the things that went right. And so I love that you brought that up. And I would just love to talk a little bit more, maybe make a little bit of a shift into kind of like your mental health aspect that you do and the first aid training that you do with that. Mental Health Month is coming up next month in May. And I'm not sure when this will air. Maybe it'll be close to May, but it's one of those things that as agriculturalists and as people in agriculture, I'm sure that every single person listening to this podcast and both of us personally have seen mental health struggles, whether that be with our loved ones or people that we know or family friends or things like that. I know that we have probably all heard those stories, and it's one of those things that it can't be overlooked anymore. And thankfully, we are coming to a place in a generation where it is getting prioritized better. But I would love to just kind of hear your thoughts and your insight as people that are surrounded by it daily. And like you said, the weather controls a lot of things. And it's not only a mindset thing, but it's also a what can the loved ones do that are surrounding those people as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So in the class that I teach, that's actually one of the main focuses is we touch on, of course, the stigma, because the stigma is so big, right? And
Yeah.
what if we believe is right or wrong and all of these things. And my husband and I actually had a really good talk last night. We were listening to a podcast, and it's hard because a lot of people have always been taught, like, just forget about it, work through it, figure it out, work a little bit harder, don't talk to anybody because we've got work to do. Well, there's always work to do if you want to work that way. I mean, that is a choice. And I think the big thing is we have to recognize that things are a little bit different and we can maybe work a little bit differently in this industry. And so I think it almost comes back to that communication too. Am I talking with people? Am I getting together with my neighbors? Because it can be very isolating in rural America, rural agriculture, doing these high stress jobs that have a lot of uncontrollable things that go along with them. And so the big thing though with the class is it's recognizing signs and symptoms. So would I notice if we're working cattle and my neighbor comes over for the day? Do I notice like when they're a little bit quieter, or if they're not saying a lot, or instead of coming to the house for lunch, they just got in their vehicle and left and headed home because they've got work to do, right? It's those little things I think that we can pick up on. But the second thing is not just noticing it, but am I willing to say something? Because I may not feel real comfortable. And that's part of what the class goes through is noticing the signs and symptoms, but then what do I do? What's my role? And I always tell people, think about when you took first aid CPR, which I'm sure most people have. I've taken it 3 times. So, but the ironic thing is I have never had to use it. I mean, honestly, I've come up on accidents, or my children have enough accidents on the ranch even, but I've never truly had to use first aid CPR, thank God. But I will tell you, mental health first aid, I bet everybody could use it on themselves or somebody else weekly, because that's just kind of the state of the world that we're living in. And so if I'm noticing that somebody seems challenged by something, what do I say? What do I do? And I give some really great examples of being in situations when I didn't know what to do. When I've had friends reach out to me and I'm just like, wait a second, they should be fine. How are they not fine? They've got a great life, a great family, all these things that we believe, well, they shouldn't have any mental health issues, but they do, or they might. And so, do I have the courage to be brave and say, hey, is everything okay? And what does everybody say?
We're
They're like,
fine.
yep, things are good. And
Yep.
if you ever pause to just ask somebody, like, are you really though? Is
Yeah.
everything okay? Like, I know we all just suffered that blizzard a month ago, or I know that you just lost your sister in that accident. Like, things have to be pretty tough right now. And if you just pause, you might be surprised how many people would love to open up and tell you more. And there's also those situations though where people don't want to. They want to believe that things are fine or that they'll figure them out, and maybe they will, but you just bringing it up to them can often be a weight off their shoulders. Like, somebody notices that I'm struggling right now. And
Hmm.
if they don't feel comfortable talking about it right now, I can bet you good money that they will come back to you in a few days or a week or a month and say, you know what, Callie, I things are really tough and I just maybe need to talk to somebody right now. Do you
Yeah.
have a minute? So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that just being a listening ear is so overlooked sometimes. Sometimes people literally just need you to listen. You could be a wall in front of them, but they just need to get it out, type of thing. And they just need someone that sits there, and you don't have to have a solution. You don't have to have an answer, but sit there and absorb. And I think that that is something that is so overlooked sometimes, and why people are maybe afraid to ask, because they're like, I don't know what to say. I don't have the perfect answer. I don't know what I'm doing. None of us do. That's the first thing. None of us do know what we're doing, but it's just listening and just being there and consoling people.
well, and I often joke with like my good friends when they reach out to me, and we catch up or we're doing whatever, and they have a problem, and I'm like, okay, do you want me to like side with you right now? Feel bad for you? Do you want me to coach you through it? Like, no, like not get in the pool with you and like truly coach you hard and give you a different perspective, or do you want me to just sit and listen? I mean, there are a lot of options that you have when somebody brings something to you. But like you said, more often than not, it's just listen to somebody. And then maybe that's all they need. I
Yeah.
think we'd all be a lot better if we connected with each other, talked about things that are going on, because we've all got hard things and there's challenges in life and stuff, but for some they might need some more help, and telling them that that's okay or helping them with those resources and stuff can be an absolute game changer for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to hear kind of, I just had this thought that our grandparents' generation, for example, you could always find our grandpas at the local gas station every morning getting coffee and chatting with their pals and all of that sort of things. And they had such a strong sense of community. But I feel like our parents' generation got very separated from that. And it has turned very isolating. And it's just not that way anymore, it feels like. And so, do you have any advice for those out there that see their parents struggling or see their loved ones struggling right now, specifically probably parents that are on the operation? They're waiting for their kids to come home and they don't have, maybe their kids are all graduated, they don't have the help that they used to, or just different things like that. How to approach those conversations with someone that you can kind of maybe give them a harsher reality check or things like that. And then also just kind of being there for them in that.
hmm I think number one is you can't be afraid to have conversation with them about some
Yeah.
of those hard things, because I mean, one of the things we talk about in the class is how early intervention is key. So I mean, especially if we think somebody's struggling with mental health, do I have the courage to bring it up, right? Am I, maybe often I'm more concerned about myself, like, oh gosh, what if they get mad at me, or what if I look silly, or what if nothing's going on? But what if something is, and you end up saving a life, you save a business, you save future Christmases. What I mean, I know that sounds extreme, but
Yeah.
I've seen it. I see it too often, because the conversations don't come up until it's too late. And so, and sometimes it's just the more simple. We talked about it earlier, but it's just open communication can be a game changer. What do you see happening on this place? What do you think the future would look like? How could you help me with that? What role do you think that I could play? All of those basic things. But I think it comes down to, am I willing and open to notice and then have a conversation about it, because it can make such a difference in people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things too that just take that one step. It's literally just one step after another. You don't have to look 10 years down the road, whether that be in this mental health step or whether it be in your entrepreneurship or anything else. It's just take that first step. Taking the first step is always the hardest step to take. And you know what? Maybe that first step for you today is calling your dad or calling your mom or calling someone that you love in your life and just checking in on them or just being like, hey, is there something I can take off of your plate today? Hey, I'm running into town today. Do you need me to grab you groceries? Or just something like that, that I think those little small acts that maybe we don't always think about are the ones that actually make the difference. And it doesn't have to be a big grand gesture. It can just be the little things to show people that you're there and just kind of like be the little knock on the window of like, hey, I'm here for you. I'm cheering you on. And when you're ready, I'm here to talk as well.
That's exactly the thing, is I think the whole world would benefit if we just noticed people more often, because I've been in situations where, I'm hustling, I've got things going on, and I like to go at a pretty good clip every day. And probably one of my favorite quotes that John Maxwell actually said that has forever stuck with me when I heard him speak one time is, he said, walk slowly through the crowds. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, how often do I not do that? Because I have my agenda. I've got work that I could do 24/7 if I wanted to. I've got kids I'm trying to juggle. I've got businesses. And I think sometimes we miss out on life because that's how we're choosing to live it. And I miss out on opportunities to connect with people or help people because I'm walking way too fast. And so, again, he said, walk slowly through the crowds. And I will tell you, since I've started thinking about that more and more and implementing it in my life, I've had some pretty incredible conversations with people, and people who needed it, who maybe lost a loved one, but had I not slowed down, like, I wouldn't have remembered that or thought about that. And just good conversations with friends where, man, if I didn't slow down, I'd be missing that relationship in my life right now. And I think it takes it full circle to, what do we want? I mean, yeah, I want to have
Yeah.
successful businesses. I want to learn and grow and all these things, but like, what really matters? You know, we're here
Mhm.
for the blink of an eye in reality. So when I look back, what am I going to be most proud of? What do I think people are going to say about me? And I hope it's not that Callie was always in such a rush and all she focused on was X, Y, and Z, but like, that people mattered and I made a difference in their lives, and my kids learned those positive things from CJ and I. And it just, right, make that list. It makes a difference when you truly think about it. What matters? Why are we working so hard on this family operation? What do we want it to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit more on building that why and kind of like putting that very forefront in front of you every single day? I think it has to go past just writing it down on a piece of paper and kind of figuring it out, but making sure that it's something that is absolutely slapping you in the face every single day, reminding you why you're doing this and things like that.
And yeah, you're spot on, because I think people, if you don't have that, all of a sudden you're doing other things that are not your priorities. They don't even
Yep.
interest you. I, a lot of times, will go through an activity with people where I have them slow down. I have them look at what are their values? What are the words that you would use to maybe describe yourself, or that am I empathetic? Am I respectful? Do I have work ethic? I mean, what are the things that are truly important to you? And then they list them out. Another thing I do then is have people list all the things they're doing right now. Like, if you actually had to pause and think of all the things that I do personally and professionally, like I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I help with our Sunday school, I'm on the fellowship team, I am part of the cattle women, or I'm on the North Dakota Stockman's board. Or what about my business? I run the beef business. I hold master classes. I mean, just if you had to lay it all out there, this would take people some time to do. And that's why I do it as an activity with them. But if you listed it all, but then I had you look back at what your values and priorities are, or I had you pull out your schedule, would they align? Like, you told me that family time is important to you, but you show me that this week you don't have time to sit down and have a meal together. So, what about when it comes to other things? You say that your health is a priority, right? But when's the last time you took time to go for a walk or lift some weights? And so I think it's eye opening for people to pause and slow down and actually look at, wow, I want this to be a value and a priority of mine. But when I look at my schedule, it's not showing up. And I think that's so important for people to do, to realize, am I living my life just by default and whatever circumstance is handed to me? I'm constantly putting out fires. Or am I strategic in laying out, I have to say yes to this and I have to say no to this? And the only way people can do that is if they know what's important to them, not what's important to how the neighbors are doing things, or what they're changing up, or what they're trying and stuff. I mean, I'm all for learning and having conversation and this and that, but I think people have to know why they say yes to something or why they say no to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you figure that out and you sit down and you take the time to actually just ask yourself, continuously ask yourself, and you know what? It cannot be something surface level of just like a little blah, blah, blah type of why. It has to be like you have to sit down and write the first thing you think about and then be like, okay, why? And write that. And then like ask yourself that like 5 or 6 times until you
Yep.
get something that is a powerful sentence that you can say to yourself over and over again every single day that reminds you on those blizzards or in those hardships or when your business is down or things like that, or when you're maybe wanting to kick your kids out of the house because they're just driving you crazy that day or things like that. Like, why are you doing this? Why am I here? And I think that plays so well into all facets of the world and just how we show up as individuals. Callie, I have so loved and enjoyed our conversation today. And I know that I wrote down a page full of notes, and I'm sure that if you're not driving right now, the people listening to this probably did the same. I would love to hear one last piece or 5 last pieces of advice, whatever that be, that you have for the next generation of agriculture coming up in today's world.
Yeah, no, I love that question. And I do. I think we could talk for hours. This has been a lot of fun getting to visit with you. But I think my biggest piece of advice is you have to figure out who you are and what you want in this world. It is so easy, the world we live in right now, to look across the aisle, to jump on social media, to see what everybody else is doing. And we believe how successful they are. And maybe I should try this or that. And I think people need to slow down and think about who they are and what they really want. And know too that it will change throughout the seasons. And that's not a bad thing. I see a lot of people in the younger generation thinking that they have to know what they're going to go to college for, and they have to know then what their job is. And it's just become this just, I don't even know how to explain it. Like they just think this is the process. And it's like, what if you could create the process? What if you could completely revamp things, think about it differently, and decide this is what I want to do? And it's hard when you go against the grain, maybe like they say, or if you want to be an entrepreneur, or if you want to change things up. Um, Especially when people that really love you and care about you maybe don't quite think it's the best idea or that it's the safe option. But I always tell people I can look at things as risks or I can see them as opportunities, but I'm only going to be able to chase those things down if I know what I truly want and who I am and believe in myself and what I have to offer the world.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that gave me chills and just made me so excited to kind of sit down and divulge everything that we have said together, myself personally, and kind of go about all of that with within my own business and within my own mindset. And I hope that everyone listening today just takes a little bit of time after they listen to this podcast and sits down and does those things that we've talked about. I think that that's a really important aspect, that when we put so much information at you in a day, to take the time to absorb it and don't just let it go in one ear out the other. Use it. And everything that Callie said today is so beneficial. If you have loved what Callie's been talking about, I know she offers one-on-one coaching, some amazing mastermind classes, everything like that. Callie, could you share where people can find you on social media, your website, and just a little bit more about what you offer personally as well?
Yes, for sure. And that is one thing I do joke about, even with a lot of my coaches, because I love to learn, I love to take things in, but it's a whole different ballgame to actually put it into action, to actually
Yeah.
implement even one thing out of the numerous ideas or thoughts that we shared today. If you can take just one and actually try it or see what you can change or do a little bit differently in your life. So people can always go to my website. It's www.callithorne.com, Calli, and then Thorne. I always spell it. I always say no E on Callie, add the E to Thorne.
Yes.
But they can find me. Places I'm probably most active though would be Facebook and Instagram, and they can both find me at Callie Thorne on Instagram or even on Facebook, along with Pioneering Legacy. That's the name of my business.
Well, thank you so much. We will have all of those linked in the show notes for you guys. And please go hit Callie up, follow her on social medias. And if you are interested in some tough love and someone to keep you accountable, go get in her coaching program or things like that. And thank you again so much, Callie, for coming on. And I hope everyone listening takes a minute to go implement these things and that you have a blessed rest of your week. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Next Generation. We'll see y'all next time.